The heavy oak doors of the Sterling estate creaked open, shattering the tense silence of the library. Every head turned. Beatrice Sterling, the matriarch, let out a scoff that echoed like a gunshot. "She actually showed up," she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Elena stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, clutching a cheap purse, looking nothing like the wife of a billionaire. They thought she was there to beg for scraps. They thought she was the mistake Richard had made before he died. But in the leather briefcase of the trembling lawyer, there sat a single envelope that would not only rewrite the Sterling legacy, but reveal a secret Elena had kept for 5 years. When the lawyer finally spoke her name, the room didn't just gasp, they stopped breathing. You won't believe what Richard left her, and who she really was. Rain lashed against the stained glass windows of Sterling Manor, a Gothic monstrosity that sat atop the highest hill in Blackwood, Connecticut. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and old money. Elena Sterling stood in the foyer, dripping water onto the pristine marble floors. She wore a simple black dress, one she had bought off the rack at a department store 3 years ago. It was faded, slightly frayed at the hem, and starkly different from the custom-tailored Italian silk morning gowns worn by the rest of the family in the drawing room. She hesitated before the double doors. Even now, with Richard gone, the fear of this house paralyzed her. For 5 years, she had been Richard's wife, and for 5 years, she had been the Sterling family's punchline. The barista, his mother, Beatrice, called her. The gold digger, his sister, Caroline, would whisper over champagne flutes. They never used her name. To them, she was an error in judgment, a temporary lapse in Richard's otherwise perfect pedigree. Richard Sterling was the CEO of Sterling Global, a shipping and logistics empire worth billions. Elena was the daughter of a library clerk, a woman who had been working 2 jobs to pay off student loans when Richard spilled his coffee on her in a downtown cafe. He had loved her for her quiet resilience. His family hated her for the exact same reason. Elena took a deep breath, clutching her handbag tighter. "Do it for Richard," she told herself. "He asked you to be here." She pushed the doors open. The library was dimly lit, the walls lined with books that had likely never been read. A fire crackled in the hearth, illuminating the faces of the vultures circling the carcass of Richard's fortune. Beatrice sat in a high-backed velvet chair near the fire, looking like a queen on a throne. Next to her was Caroline, scrolling through her phone, looking bored. Marcus, Richard's younger, irresponsible brother, was pouring himself a glass of scotch at the wet bar. The conversation died instantly as Elena stepped onto the Persian rug. "Good God," Beatrice muttered, not bothering to lower her voice. Ideally, the help uses the side entrance, even on funeral days. Marcus snorted into his drink. "Easy, mother. That's the grieving widow you're talking about. Though looking at that dress, she's grieving her wardrobe budget more than my brother." Elena felt the heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her chin up. Richard had taught her that silence was often louder than screaming. She walked past them, aiming for a small wooden chair in the corner, far away from the family circle. "I'm just here for the reading, Beatrice," Elena said softly. "We know why you're here," Caroline snapped, looking up from her phone. Her eyes were sharp, predatory. "You're hoping Richard forgot to sign the prenup. Or maybe you think if you cry hard enough, Mr. Pendleton will find a few $1,000s hidden in the couch cushions for you." "Caroline, that's enough," a grave voice boomed from the desk. Arthur Pendleton, the family's attorney for 40 years, sat behind the massive mahogany desk. He was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked at the family with a gaze that could freeze water. "Sit down," Arthur commanded. "All of you." We have a lot to get through. And frankly, Richard's instructions were specific. Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. Oh, get on with it, Arthur. We know the drill. Richard gets the majority, obviously, but since he's gone, it reverts to the matriarch, me, and is split among the siblings. Just tell the girl she gets the condo in the city and send her on her way. I have a gala to attend at 7. Arthur didn't blink. He opened a thick leather binder. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the room. Richard drafted a new will 3 weeks ago, Arthur said. The silence in the room shifted. It wasn't bored anymore. It was sharp. New will? Marcus asked, setting his glass down. He didn't tell us about a new will. He didn't want you to know, Arthur replied. He looked directly at Elena. She felt a shiver run down her spine. Richard had been sick for months, a hidden illness he kept from the press, but he had spent those last weeks locking himself in his study. Let's begin, Arthur said. To my brother Marcus, Arthur read, his voice steady. I leave my collection of vintage sports cars, including the 1965 Shelby Cobra and the Ferrari 250 GTO. Marcus pumped his fist. Yes, I knew he wouldn't leave me hanging. That GTO alone is worth 50 million. However, Arthur continued, raising a hand, the title of these vehicles will be held in a trust. The trust stipulates that Marcus must maintain sobriety for 24 consecutive months, verified by weekly drug tests, before he can drive or sell a single one. If he fails a test, the cars are to be crushed into scrap metal and donated to an art commune. Marcus turned pale. Crushed? Is this a joke? I can't stay sober for 2 years. Then you better start liking scrap metal art, Arthur said dryly. He turned the page. To my sister, Caroline, I leave you my shares in the Sterling Fashion House. Caroline squealed. Finally, I can fire that incompetent creative director. On the condition, Arthur interrupted, that you work as an entry-level seamstress in the factory floor for exactly 1 year. You will punch a clock, you will meet quotas, and you will live on the minimum wage salary provided. If you quit, or if you reveal your identity to the other workers to gain favor, the shares will be liquidated and donated to the labor union. Caroline's jaw dropped. I can't live on minimum wage. Beatrice, do something. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. This is absurd, Arthur. Richard was clearly not in his right mind. We will contest this. He was perfectly sane, Beatrice. In fact, he recorded a video attestation which I will play if you try to sue, Arthur countered. Now, for you, Beatrice. Beatrice straightened her posture. Go on. I suppose he wants me to run the charity foundation. To my mother, Beatrice Sterling, Arthur read. I leave the Sterling family crest, the antique jewelry collection, and the manor itself. Beatrice exhaled, a smug smile returning. Well, that's more like it. A bit sentimental, but fitting. However, Arthur said, the ghost of a smile touching his lips, ownership of the manor is granted only if you allow Elena Sterling to reside here in the master suite for as long as she wishes. You may not evict her, you may not harass her, and she has veto power over any renovations or staff changes. Beatrice stood up so fast her chair fell over. What? You expect me to live with her and let her boss me around in my own house? It's not your house yet, Beatrice, Arthur reminded her. And if you refuse these terms, the manor goes to the state to be turned into a homeless shelter. Elena sat frozen in her corner. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Richard was dead, yet he was orchestrating chaos from the grave. He was forcing them to face the very things they mocked: sobriety, hard work, and humility. This is insanity, Beatrice screamed. He's giving everything to us with strings attached. Where is the liquid cash, the stocks, the billions, Arthur? Who gets the control of Sterling Global?" Arthur closed the folder. He clasped his hands together and looked over his spectacles at the trembling girl in the corner. "The remainder of the estate," Arthur said slowly, "including the controlling interest in Sterling Global, the offshore accounts in the Caymans, the real estate portfolio in London, Tokyo, and Dubai, and the sum of $4.2 billion. The room held its breath. "Is left to the sole beneficiary," Arthur said, "Mrs. Elena Sterling." For 10 seconds, the only sound in the library was the crackling of the fireplace. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Beatrice stared at Arthur, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with a mix of horror and confusion. Caroline looked as if she had been slapped. Marcus just dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor, sending whiskey and crystal shards flying. But no one flinched. "Excuse me?" Beatrice finally whispered. Her voice was trembling, stripped of its usual imperious tone. "Did you say Elena?" "I did," Arthur replied calmly, reaching into his briefcase to pull out a thick stack of documents. "That's impossible," Caroline shrieked, jumping to her feet. "She's the help. She's a nobody. Richard would never give the company to someone who doesn't even know which fork to use for salad." "It's a mistake," Marcus stammered, his face red. "The will is a fake. Arthur, you old bat, you forged it." Arthur slammed his hand on the desk, a sudden, thunderous noise that made everyone jump. "One more accusation of fraud, Marcus, and I will have you removed by security. I drafted this will myself. I witnessed Richard sign it, and I have 3 forensic psychiatrists who certified his mental state just moments before." Arthur turned his gaze to Elena. She hadn't moved. She sat in the wooden chair, her hands gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't smiling. She looked terrified. "Elena," Arthur said gently, his tone softening for the first time. "Richard left you a letter. He wanted you to read it before you accepted the inheritance." Arthur walked over and handed her a cream-colored envelope, sealed with red wax. Elena's hands shook as she took it. She could feel the eyes of the Sterling family burning holes into her skin. If looks could kill, she would have been dead on the floor. "Read it aloud," Beatrice demanded. "If he's giving our money to this leech, we have a right to know why." Elena ignored her. She broke the seal and unfolded the letter. It was written in Richard's scrawling, messy handwriting. Tears pricked her eyes as she recognized the ink. "My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the sharks are circling. I know you are sitting in the corner right now. I know you are wearing something simple because you didn't want to upset them. I know you are afraid. Do not be. My family thinks you are weak because you are kind. They think you are poor because you are humble. They never understood that true wealth isn't money. It's character. And you, my love, are the richest woman I have ever known. I am not giving you this money to spoil you. I am giving it to you because you are the only one I trust to use it to fix the damage my family has done. They use money as a weapon. I want you to use it as a tool. But there is one more thing, Elena. A secret I kept even from you. Do you remember when you told me you were an orphan? That you didn't know who your father was?" Elena paused. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked up at Arthur. He nodded encouragingly. She continued reading silently, her eyes widening with every word. "I did some digging, Elena. Before I got sick, I found him. And I found out why you have always felt like an outsider. You aren't just Elena Caldwell, the library clerk. You are the biological daughter of Alexander Rothschild." Elena gasped aloud. The paper slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor. "What?" Caroline snapped. "What does it say? Why did she gasp?" Beatrice stepped forward, her face twisted in a sneer. "Probably realized she's too incompetent to manage a billion-dollar portfolio. Give it here." Beatrice snatched the letter from the floor before Elena could stop her. She scanned the page, her eyes darting back and forth. Then Beatrice froze. Her face went from red to a ghostly, chalky white. She looked at Elena, then back at the letter, then at Elena again. The look of disgust was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. "Rothschild?" Beatrice whispered. "Alexander. Rothschild?" "Who is Alexander Rothschild?" Marcus asked, confused. "You idiot!" Caroline hissed, looking over her mother's shoulder. "Alexander Rothschild isn't just a billionaire. He's the billionaire. He owns half of Europe's banking systems. He's old money, ancient money. Compared to the Rothschilds, the Sterlings are peasants." Arthur cleared his throat. "Correct. Richard discovered that Elena was given up for adoption at birth to protect her from a kidnapping threat targeted at the Rothschild family 30 years ago. Alexander Rothschild died last year without a known heir. His estate has been held in probate, waiting for a DNA match." Arthur pulled another document from his bag. "We ran the DNA test using a hair sample from Eleanor's hairbrush, which Richard provided. It's a match." The room spun. Elena felt dizzy. She wasn't just inheriting Richard's billions. She was already the heir to a fortune 10 times the size of the Sterling Empire. Beatrice dropped into a chair, looking faint. "So, she's richer than us? By how much?" "By about $50 billion, Arthur said, casually. The dynamic in the room shifted so violently it was almost palpable. A moment ago, Elena was the dirt beneath their shoes. Now, she was the sun, and they were desperate planets hoping not to burn. Caroline's face transformed. She forced a bright, sickeningly sweet smile. "Oh, Elena, my goodness, I always said you had a certain elegance about you. Didn't I, Mother? I always said Elena had royal blood." "Yes," Beatrice stammered, smoothing her skirt. "Elena, darling, surely you know we were just grieving. Stress makes people say awful things, but we are family, and family sticks together." Elena stood up. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold clarity. She looked at Beatrice, then at Caroline, then at Marcus. She saw them for exactly what they were. "Family sticks together?" Elena repeated, her voice steady. "Of course!" Beatrice cried, reaching out to touch Elena's arm. Elena stepped back. "Arthur," she said, turning to the lawyer, "does the will give me full control over the Sterling assets immediately?" "Effective immediately," Arthur confirmed. Elena nodded. She turned back to Beatrice. "You said the help should use the side entrance." Beatrice blinked. "What?" "You said earlier," Elena reminded her, "that the help should use the side entrance. Since I am now the owner of this house, and I control the accounts that pay for your drivers, your chefs, and your security." Elena walked toward the door, stopping just before she exited. She turned back, her silhouette framed by the lightning flashing outside. "I'm firing the staff, Beatrice, all of them, effective tonight. If you want to stay in my house, as the will allows, you can cook your own meals. You can clean your own toilets. And if you want to leave the property, you can walk." "You can't do that," Marcus yelled. "I can," Elena said. "And one more thing. Caroline?" Caroline flinched. "Yes, Elena." "The year of sewing work Richard assigned you?" Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm doubling it. 2 years. Or you don't get a dime." She pushed the doors open and walked out into the rain, leaving the Sterling family in the darkness of the library, gasping for air. But as Elena climbed into the waiting town car Arthur had arranged, she didn't know that the drama was far from over. Alexander Rothschild had enemies, and by revealing who she was, Richard hadn't just made her rich, he had put a target on her back. From the shadows of the estate gates, a black sedan idled. The driver picked up a phone. "We found her," a deep voice whispered. "The Rothschild girl. She's at the Sterling estate. Initiate Phase 2. The next morning, Elena woke up not in her cramped one-bedroom apartment near the library, but in the master suite of Sterling Manor. The bed was the size of a small island, the sheets made of Egyptian cotton that felt like woven air. For a moment, she forgot. Then, the smell of stale champagne and the memory of Beatrice's horrified face brought it all rushing back. She was Elena Sterling, billionaire widow, Rothschild heiress, and the new CEO of Sterling Global. She got dressed in the only business-appropriate attire she owned, a navy blazer and grey slacks she used for library interviews. When she descended the grand staircase, the house was eerily quiet. There were no maids dusting the banisters, no butler ironing newspapers. The kitchen was dark. Elena found Beatrice in the dining room, staring morosely at a bowl of dry cereal. The matriarch was wearing a silk dressing gown, her hair dishevelled. "The coffee machine is broken," Beatrice snapped, not looking up, "and I don't know how to use the stove." "There's a manual in the third drawer," Elena said calmly, grabbing an apple from a fruit bowl. Beatrice slammed her spoon down. "This is barbaric, Elena. You can't seriously expect me to live like this. I have a reputation. What will people think when I answer my own door?" "They'll think you're finally contributing to society," Elena said. She checked her watch, a simple Timex Richard had given her before they were married. "I have a board meeting. Don't forget to take out the trash today, Beatrice. Tuesday is pickup day." Elena walked out to the driveway, where Arthur Pendleton was waiting by a sleek, armoured Mercedes. The old lawyer looked at her approvingly. "Ready to enter the lion's den, Mrs. Sterling?" "No," Elena admitted, her stomach churning. "But Richard thought I was." The drive to the city was a blur. When they arrived at the gleaming 70-story glass tower that was Sterling Global Headquarters, Elena felt tiny. This was Richard's world, a world of sharks in Italian suits. As she walked through the lobby, conversation stopped. Hundreds of employees stared. They had read the morning news headlines. "The barista billionaire, mystery widow takes the helm of Sterling Global." Up on the top floor, Richard's office remained exactly as he had left it. It smelled faintly of his cologne and old leather. Elena walked behind the massive desk and sat in his chair. It felt wrong. It felt too big. "They're waiting in the boardroom," Arthur said softly. "The board of directors. They are angry, confused, and they think you are a temporary inconvenience they can pay off." "What do I do, Arthur? I don't know the first thing about international shipping logistics." Arthur placed a hand on the desk. "Richard didn't leave you the company because you know logistics, Elena. He left it to you because you know people. You know when someone is lying to you. You know the value of $1. These men," he gestured to the boardroom door, "have forgotten both." Elena took a deep breath. She stood up, smoothing her cheap blazer. "Let's go." The boardroom was an imposing space of polished granite and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 12 men in expensive suits sat around a long table. Marcus was there, looking hungover, nursing a glass of water. When Elena entered, nobody stood up. The chairman of the board, a man named Elias Thorne, with eyes like flint, leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Sterling," a surprising turn of events. We were just discussing a severance package for you. A generous monthly stipend so you can return to your previous life and let the professionals handle the company." Elena walked to the head of the table. She didn't sit. She placed her hands flat on the granite surface and leaned forward. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice shaking slightly before finding its strength. "If by professionals you mean the people who allowed Sterling Global's Asian division to hemorrhage $50 million last quarter due to oversight you ignored, then I think I'll pass." Thorne sat up straighter. The room went silent. "How did you know about that?" "Richard kept detailed journals," Elena lied. Richard had told her about it during one of his late-night vents, worried his board was getting sloppy. He also noted that 3 of you are currently under investigation by the SEC for insider trading. She let that hang in the air. Several men shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I am not here for a stipend," Elena continued, her voice hardening. "I am here to run this company. Richard wanted it cleaned up. That starts today. Anyone who has a problem with my leadership can tender their resignation to Arthur by noon. Good morning." She turned and walked out before they could respond. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought she might faint, but she made it back to Richard's office and closed the door. She collapsed into the chair, trembling. She had done it. She had faced the lions. But the real danger wasn't in the boardroom. Back at Sterling Manor, Beatrice was on the phone, her voice hushed. "Yes, Caroline, I know it's humiliating. I just broke a nail scrubbing a pot," Beatrice hissed into her mobile. "But listen to me. We have to get her out. If she remains CEO, and worse, if she actually gets that Rothschild money, we are finished." "What do we do?" Caroline whined on the other end. "I'm at this horrid factory. It smells like machine oil and sweat. I can't do 2 years of this, Mother." "You won't have to," Beatrice said, her eyes narrowing as she looked out the window at the unguarded estate grounds. I remembered something. Richard had a safe in his study, a hidden one. He used to keep insurance files there on his competitors. Maybe he had one on his wife, too, just in case. "You think Richard had dirt on Elena?" "Richard was a Sterling. We always have leverage," Beatrice whispered. "Elena fired the security staff. The house is wide open. Tonight, while she's playing CEO in the city, we're going to crack that safe." Elena's first week was a trial by fire. She barely slept. She spent her days in meetings where executives tried to overwhelm her with technical jargon, and her nights poring over financial reports with Arthur, trying to understand the behemoth she now controlled. She missed Richard terribly. Every corner of the office, every shadowed hallway of the empty manor reminded her of him. The grief was a heavy cloak she had to wear while pretending to be armored in steel. But it was the silence from the Rothschild side that unnerved her the most. Arthur had filed the paperwork to claim the estate of her biological father, Alexander Rothschild. It was a process that would take months, involving international courts and intense scrutiny. "Someone will come," Arthur warned her one rainy afternoon in the office. "Alexander Rothschild didn't just have money, Elena. He had power. The kind that topples governments. When he died without an heir, a vacuum was created. Very dangerous people have been trying to fill it. Now, you're standing in their way." His warning came true sooner than expected. Elena was leaving the office late one evening. The lobby was deserted except for the night security guard. As she pushed through the revolving doors to her waiting car, a man stepped out from the shadows of the adjacent building. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. He had pale skin and eyes that seemed devoid of any warmth. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a weapon wrapped in silk. "Mrs. Sterling," he said. His voice was smooth, accented slightly, perhaps Swiss or Austrian. Elena's driver, a burly ex-marine Arthur had hired, stepped out of the car immediately, hand hovering near his jacket pocket. "Stay back," the driver warned. The man ignored the driver, his eyes fixed on Elena. "My name is Victor Vane. I represent interested parties in Europe." "If you want a meeting, call my office," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This isn't business, Elena Rothschild," Vane said softly. The use of her biological name sent a chill down her spine. "This is about survival. You are stepping into a world you do not understand. A world your father, Alexander, built on secrets and bones." He reached into his pocket. The driver tensed, drawing his weapon. But Vane only pulled out a plain white calling card with a single phone number on it. He held it out between two fingers. "There are forces preparing to move against you. They don't want the Rothschild fortune unified under an amateur. I offer protection. For a price." "I don't need your protection," Elena said, though her knees were shaking. Vane smiled, a thin, humorless curve of his lips. "Everyone needs protection, my dear, especially when the wolves are already inside the house." He dropped the card on the wet pavement and melted back into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. Elena got into the car, her heart hammering. Wolves inside the house. She didn't know how right he was. While Elena was being confronted by Vane, back at Stirling Manor, Beatrice and Marcus were in Richard's study. Marcus had broken the sobriety clause 3 days ago, but Beatrice was hiding it, supplying him with vodka to keep him pliable and angry. "Hurry up, you useless drunk," Beatrice hissed, holding a flashlight as Marcus fiddled with a hidden panel behind a bookshelf. "I'm trying. Richard changed the combination," Marcus slurred, sweat dripping from his forehead. There was a loud click. The safe door swung open. It was mostly empty, except for a single red velvet pouch. Beatrice grabbed it greedily. She dumped the contents onto Richard's desk. It wasn't documents. It wasn't money. It was a syringe and a small vial of clear liquid with no label. "What is that?" Marcus asked, squinting. Beatrice picked up the vial, holding it to the light. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. "I remember this. Richard showed it to me years ago. He got it from a contact in South America when we were having trouble with a union leader. It mimics a heart attack. Untraceable in an autopsy if you don't know what to look for." Richard had poison? Marcus looked sick. "Richard was a pragmatist," Beatrice said coldly. She pocketed the vial and the syringe. "He kept it for emergencies. Well, I'd call this an emergency. Mother, what are you going to do?" "Elena is hosting the Stirling Foundation Gala on Saturday," Beatrice said, her eyes glittering in the flashlight beam. "Her first big public appearance. Everyone will be there. The press, the board, the socialites." Beatrice patted Marcus on the cheek. "You just keep drinking, darling. Leave the heavy lifting to Mommy. By Sunday morning, the grieving widow will be grieving no more, and the Stirling estate, and perhaps even the Rothschild claim, will revert to its rightful owners." The night of the gala arrived. Elena stood backstage in the grand ballroom of the city's finest hotel. She wore a stunning emerald green gown Arthur had commissioned for her. It was armor of a different kind. She was terrified. 500 of the city's elite were out there, waiting for her to fail. Beatrice and Caroline were in the audience, forced to attend by Arthur to show family unity. They looked miserable in off-the-rack department store dresses, a petty revenge Elena had enjoyed arranging. "You're on in 2 minutes, Mrs. Stirling," the stage manager whispered. Elena took a deep breath. She thought of Richard's letter. True wealth is character. She walked onto the stage. The applause was polite, tepid. The spotlights blinded her. She reached the podium and began her speech, reading from the teleprompter. "Welcome, friends, colleagues, my late husband, Richard." Suddenly, the text on the teleprompter flickered. The prepared speech disappeared. In its place, bright red letters scrolled across the screen. "Elena the fraud. Library mouse to billionaire whore. We know who your father is. We are coming for you." Elena froze. She stared at the screen, horrified. The audience muttered in confusion as she stopped talking. Then, the main ballroom lights cut out. The room was plunged into pitch blackness. Screams erupted. Panic. Chairs scraped against the floor. Elena gripped the podium in the dark. "Arthur!" she called out. A hand grabbed her arm in the darkness. It wasn't gentle. It was a vice-like grip. "Come with me if you want to live," a voice hissed in her ear. It was Victor Vane. Before she could protest, another figure slammed into them. There was a scuffle in the dark, a grunt of pain, and the distinct sound of a taser crackling. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. The stage was empty. Elena was gone, and on the floor where she had been standing lay Victor Vane, unconscious, a strange small dart protruding from his neck. In the chaos of the crowd below, Beatrice stood still, clutching her evening bag tightly. The syringe was no longer inside. She smiled into the red darkness. "Phase 2 complete," she whispered to no one. Elena woke up to the hum of ventilation fans and the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. She wasn't in a hospital. She was in a room with concrete walls, a steel door, and a bank of monitors covering one wall. She sat up, gasping, her hand flying to her neck. She felt fine, just groggy. "You're safe, Mrs. Sterling." Arthur Pendleton sat in a folding chair in the corner, reading a newspaper. He looked as calm as if he were in his law office, despite the fact that they were clearly in some kind of underground bunker. "Where am I?" Elena asked, swinging her legs off the cot. "What happened at the gala? That man, Vane, he grabbed me." "Victor Vane saved your life," Arthur said grimly. He pointed to a glass partition on the other side of the room. Behind it, in a makeshift medical bay, Victor Vane lay intubated, surrounded by beeping machines. His skin was a sickly shade of grey. "Saved me?" Elena stood up, her legs wobbly. "He threatened me outside my office." "He was trying to warn you," Arthur corrected. "We analyzed the dart they pulled out of his neck. It contained a concentrated dose of tetrodotoxin, pufferfish poison. If that dart had hit you, you would have been dead before you hit the floor." Vane stepped in front of it. "He took the bullet meant for you." Elena stared at the man behind the glass. The villain was a savior? The lines were blurring so fast she felt dizzy. "Who shot the dart?" Elena asked. "We don't know yet," Arthur admitted. "But we know who cleared the path for the shooter." Arthur picked up a remote and clicked one of the monitors on the wall. It showed a grainy black and white feed. Elena recognized the setting immediately. Richard's study at Stirling Manor. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. On the screen, Beatrice Sterling was holding a flashlight while Marcus cracked the safe. Elena watched in horror as Beatrice found the vial, pocketed it, and laughed. The audio was crisp. Richard had installed high-fidelity microphones everywhere. "By Sunday morning, the grieving widow will be grieving no more." Beatrice's voice echoed in the concrete room. Elena felt a wave of nausea. She was going to kill me. My own mother-in-law. "She intended to," Arthur said. "But Beatrice is a local player. She's messy. She hired a cheap thug to cut the power at the gala so she could inject you with that heart attack serum during the confusion. But she didn't know there was a second predator in the room. The professional assassin who fired the dart used Beatrice's blackout as cover. Beatrice unwittingly opened the door for a much bigger monster. Arthur stood up and walked to the monitors. He switched the channel to a live news feed. "Breaking news," the chyron read. "Sterling Global shares plummet as CEO vanishes." On the screen, Beatrice was standing on the steps of Sterling Manor, dabbling her eyes with a handkerchief. Microphones were shoved in her face. "We are devastated," Beatrice sobbed to the cameras. "Elena has always been unstable. The pressure of the inheritance was too much. We believe she faked her own kidnapping to run away with the money. She abandoned the company. She abandoned the family that took her in." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes hard as flint. "As the matriarch, I am calling for an emergency vote of no confidence. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the board will vote to strip Elena of her titles and freeze her assets for her own protection. I will step in as interim CEO." Elena's hands curled into fists. "She's stealing the company. She's framing me." "She's winning," Arthur said bluntly. "If the board votes tomorrow, you lose Sterling Global. Once you lose the corporate protection, the Rothschild enemies will pick you apart. You need the company's security resources to survive." "So we go to the police," Elena said. "We show them the video of the safe." "The police will take days to verify the footage. Beatrice has judges in her pocket. By the time they issue an arrest warrant, she will have gutted the company and sold off the assets to the highest bidder." Arthur turned to Elena. "There is only one way to stop this. You have to walk into that boardroom tomorrow morning. You have to look her in the eye and bury her." "They tried to kill me, Arthur. If I go back out there—" "I have a team," Arthur said. "Former Mossad. Richard paid them a retainer for 20 years, just for this scenario. We will get you into the building. But once you are in that room, you are on your own. Can you do it?" Elena looked at the screen, at Beatrice's fake tears, at the empire Richard built being torn apart by vultures. She thought about the years of insults, the barista, the nobody. She looked at her reflection in the dark monitor. She didn't look like a librarian anymore. She looked like a Sterling. She looked like a Rothschild. "Get the car," Elena said. "I have a board meeting to attend." The atmosphere in the Sterling Global boardroom was electric. Elias Thorne sat at the head of the table, checking his watch. Beatrice sat to his right, wearing a black power suit, looking every inch the victorious queen. Caroline was there too, nervously tapping her phone, while Marcus sat slumped in a chair, looking pale and sweaty. "It is 9:05 a.m., Elias announced. "Mrs. Sterling has not appeared. Her absence confirms her abdication of duty. I move that we proceed with the vote to remove Elena Sterling as CEO and appoint Beatrice Sterling as interim director." "Seconded," a board member said quickly. "Excellent," Beatrice smiled, pulling a fountain pen from her purse. "Let's get this over with. I have a company to save." She reached for the documents in the center of the table. Boom! The double doors of the boardroom didn't just open, they were kicked open. Two large men in tactical gear stepped in, scanning the room with cold precision. Before the board members could scream, Elena walked through the doors. She wasn't wearing a business suit. She was wearing the same emerald gown from the gala, torn at the hem and stained with grime. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail. She looked like she had walked out of hell and straight into the office. "Sorry I'm late," Elena said, her voice ringing off the glass walls. "Traffic was murder." Beatrice dropped her pen. Her face went slack. You're supposed to be dead?" Elena finished the sentence, walking toward the table. "Run away. Which lie were you selling today, Beatrice?" "Security," Elias Thorne roared, standing up. "Get this woman out of here. She is trespassing." "Sit down, Elias," Elena commanded. She didn't shout, but the authority in her voice, the Rothschild steel, made him freeze. "I am still the majority shareholder. I am still the CEO, and this meeting is now under my control." She threw a USB drive onto the granite table. It slid across the surface and stopped right in front of Beatrice. "What is this?" Beatrice whispered, her hands trembling. "Arthur," Elena said. On the wall-mounted screen, the feed from the boardroom switched. The video from Richard's study began to play. The room went silent as the board members watched Beatrice and Marcus break into the safe. They heard the plot. They heard the laughter. "Richard had poison. I'd call this an emergency." Caroline let out a high-pitched sob and covered her mouth. "Mother, you didn't." Marcus put his head in his hands. "It's over." The video ended. Elena leaned over the table, her face inches from Beatrice's. "You didn't just try to steal my company, Beatrice. You conspired to murder me. That is a felony. And since you crossed state lines to arrange the gala sabotage, it's a federal crime. The FBI is in the lobby. They're coming up the elevator right now." Beatrice looked around the room frantically. Her allies looked away. Elias Thorne was suddenly very interested in his paperwork. It was a joke," Beatrice stammered, standing up, knocking her chair over. "We were just venting. The vial. It was just water. Prove it wasn't." "We don't have to," Elena said, "because the intent is enough for conspiracy. But there's more." Elena signaled to one of the tactical guards. He stepped forward and placed a heavy file in front of Elias Thorne. "While I was in the bunker," Elena addressed the board, "my forensic accountants went through the family trusts. Beatrice has been siphoning money from the charity foundation for 10 years to pay for Marcus's gambling debts and Caroline's failed fashion lines. That's embezzlement." Elias opened the file. His face turned purple. "Millions," he muttered. "She stole millions from the orphan fund." "You ungrateful little wretch!" Beatrice screamed, lunging across the table at Elena. She never made it. The tactical guards intercepted her, pinning her arms behind her back. At that moment, the doors opened again. 4 FBI agents in windbreakers entered, guns holstered, but hands ready. "Beatrice Sterling, Marcus Sterling," the lead agent announced. "You are under arrest." "No, no!" Beatrice shrieked as they cuffed her. She thrashed, her mask of civility completely shattering. As they dragged her toward the door, she locked eyes with Elena. "You think you won?" Beatrice spat, her eyes wild with madness. "You stupid girl. You think I'm the danger. I was the only thing keeping them out." Elena frowned. "What are you talking about?" Beatrice laughed, a manic, broken sound. "The debts! The gambling debts! Marcus didn't owe money to casinos, you fool. He owed it to the Europeans, the syndicate. I gave them the security codes to the Sterling servers to pay off the interest. I let them in." Elena's blood ran cold. "They don't want the company," Beatrice screamed as she was hauled into the hallway. "They want the shipping routes. They're using our ships to move their weapons. And now that I'm gone, they're coming for you to get the codes." The door slammed shut. Beatrice was gone. Silence returned to the boardroom. Elias Thorne looked at Elena, terrified. "Mrs. Sterling, we didn't know." "Get out," Elena whispered. "Mrs. Sterling." "Get out!" Elena shouted, slamming her hand on the table. "All of you, consider the board dissolved. Get out of my building." The men scrambled for the exits like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Elena stood alone in the massive room. She should have felt triumphant. She had won. She had exposed them. But Beatrice's words echoed in her mind. "I gave them the security codes." Elena looked at her phone. She had a missed message from Arthur. "Check the server logs. Now." She ran to Richard's office and logged into the mainframe. The screen was a sea of red warning lights. Unauthorized access detected. Firewall breached. Location: Port of Singapore. Location: Port of Rotterdam. Beatrice hadn't just tried to kill her. She had sold the keys to the kingdom to a global crime syndicate. And now, Elena was the only one standing between them and a global network of illegal arms trafficking. The phone on Richard's desk rang. It was an internal line. Elena picked it up slowly. "Hello?" "Mrs. Sterling," a distorted voice said. It wasn't Victor Vane. It was deeper, colder. "Beatrice was a useful idiot, but you seem competent." "We like competent." "Who is this?" Elena demanded. "We have your ships. We have your routes. And unless you want every captain in your fleet to disappear at sea tonight, you will come to the port of New York alone at midnight. Bring the encryption key for the Rothschild accounts. And if I don't, then we will release the information we have about your father," the voice said. "Alexander Rothschild didn't die of natural causes, Elena. We killed him. Don't make us kill his daughter, too." The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone. The local drama was over. The war had just begun. Midnight at the port of New York was a graveyard of steel. Towers of shipping containers stacked 5 high created a labyrinth of rusted canyons, slick with rain and oil. The wind howled off the Hudson River, cutting through Elena's coat like a knife. She walked alone down the center of the main pier, clutching a silver hard drive in her hand. Ahead, under the harsh yellow glow of a floodlight, a black SUV idled. 3 men stood waiting. In the center was a man who looked like a university professor. Tweed jacket, spectacles, graying beard. But his eyes were dead. This was the broker. The man who had pulled Beatrice's strings. The man who had killed her father. "Punctual," the broker said, his voice carrying over the wind. "I appreciate that in a partner." "We are not partners," Elena said, stopping 10 feet away. Her voice was steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "I brought the encryption key. Release my ships." The broker chuckled. "You think this is a trade? My dear, this is a surrender. Hand over the key, and perhaps I will let you keep the Sterling Company as a front for our operations. Refuse, and you join Richard in the ground." Elena held up the drive. "This key unlocks the Rothschild banking servers in Zurich. It gives you access to $50 billion and the identity of every contact my father ever had. It's everything you want. Bring it to me." Elena took a step forward, then stopped. She looked up at the towering crane above them. "You said you killed Alexander Rothschild," she said loudly. "Why?" The broker smiled cruelly. "Alexander grew a conscience. He wanted to get out of the arms trade. He threatened to expose us. So we removed him, just like we removed Richard when he started sniffing around our shipping manifests." Elena's blood froze. Richard didn't die of a sickness? Richard was slowly poisoned over 6 months, the broker admitted, checking his watch. Arsenic in his scotch, courtesy of a bribed butler. He never stood a chance. "Now give me the drive." Elena stared at him. The grief she had felt for months crystallized into something colder, harder. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage. "You killed my husband," Elena whispered. Then she looked the broker in the eye and smiled. "Then you should have known better than to meet his wife in a shipping yard." Elena dropped the hard drive. She crushed it under her heel. The broker's eyes widened. "What have you done? Kill her! Kill her now!" The 2 guards raised their silenced pistols. Click. Nothing happened. The guards looked at their weapons in confusion. "Magnetic interference," a voice called out from the darkness atop a container stack. Victor Vane jumped down, landing silently beside Elena. He looked pale, bandaged under his suit, but his gun was steady. "We are standing directly over the main electromagnet for the crane. I turned it on 10 seconds ago. Your firing pins are jammed." The broker snarled. "Then I'll kill her with my bare hands." He lunged at Elena, pulling a knife from his jacket. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't run. She pressed a button on the small remote she had been concealing in her pocket. Above them, the massive crane groaned. A 40-foot shipping container, suspended directly over the SUV and the broker's men, released its locks. Crash. The earth shook. The container slammed down behind the broker, blocking his escape route. The impact knocked him off his feet. Sirens wailed from every direction. The port floodlights turned blindingly bright as red and blue lights swarmed the pier. "Federal agents, drop the weapon." Arthur Pendleton stepped out from behind a forklift, flanked by a SWAT team. He looked at Elena and nodded. The broker scrambled in the mud, trying to stand, but Victor Vane was on him in a second, kicking the knife away and pinning him to the wet asphalt. "It's over," Elena said, standing over the man who had destroyed her family. "And by the way, the ships you wanted? I rerouted them to a naval base in Virginia 3 hours ago. The U.S. Navy is inspecting your cargo right now." The broker glared up at her, spitting blood. You are just a librarian. You are nobody." Elena adjusted her coat. She looked at the empire of steel around her, then at the flashing lights of justice. "I am Elena Sterling," she said, "and I am the daughter of Alexander Rothschild. I am the one who cleaned up your mess." The sun was shining on the Sterling estate, but it looked different now. The gloomy Gothic curtains were gone. The gates were open. Children ran across the lawn, laughing. Elena stood on the porch, watching them. She had turned the massive, empty manor into the Richard Sterling Foundation for the Arts, a home and school for underprivileged children who, like her, had started with nothing. Arthur walked up the steps, holding a tablet. "Quarterly earnings are up 12%, Mrs. Sterling," Arthur said, "and the board is terrified of you. They approved the Green Energy Initiative without a single question." "Good," Elena smiled. "And Beatrice?" "Sentenced to 25 years, Arthur replied. "Marcus and Caroline took plea deals. Marcus is in rehab in Arizona. Caroline is actually working. She's a shift manager at a diner in Jersey. She says she hates it, but she's paying her own rent." "Send her a Christmas card," Elena said, "but no check." A black car pulled up the driveway. Victor Vane stepped out. He was now her head of security, legally employed and fiercely loyal. "The jet is ready, Elena," Victor said. "The Rothschild trustees in Geneva are waiting." Elena looked out at the garden one last time. She touched the simple locket around her neck that held Richard's photo. She wasn't the ignored wife anymore. She wasn't the scared girl in the rain. She was a titan of industry, a protector of the innocent, and a survivor. She walked down the steps, her head held high. "Let's go," Elena said. "We have work to do." Wow. Can you believe that transformation? From an ignored wife standing in the rain to a billionaire CEO taking down an international crime syndicate. Elena didn't just inherit money. She inherited a backbone of steel. It just goes to show, you never really know who someone is until you push them to the edge. The Sterling family thought they could crush her, but they only made her stronger. Now, I have a question for you guys. If you were Elena, would you have forgiven Caroline and Marcus, or would you have left them with absolutely nothing? Let me know your verdict in the comments down below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of drama, betrayal, and sweet, sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want more stories like this, Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.